All right, well, first and foremost, guys, thanks a bunch for putting on an awesome air show. You've heard it probably before. I said on WEAU yesterday morning when I was doing an interview with them, but we came here in 2008. First time, as I understand it, that the Boy Scouts have ever hosted a major jet team, which is no small undertaking, and I'm aware of that. I'm our team's operations officer, so I set up all these air shows, and I'm in charge of how they run and how we execute as a squadron once we come here. And it's no small task to run an air show, especially not with a team as big as the Blue Angels. But the Boy Scouts here in this town did such an amazing job that we named it our show of the year for 2008. And that is a, no kidding, big deal to us. We go to San Francisco, we go to New York City, we go to Chicago, we go to cities all over the country, and they have professional staffs that run these air shows. They have a staff of people who are paid year-round to do it, and this show is better run than theirs. So that's a testament to your hard work and to the awesome work of the show staff. So nice job to this council and to the air show staff. We appreciate you having us back. It seems like every time I come here, it's clear skies at night and then rain during the day. So I think all that means is you're going to have to keep inviting us back for air shows until we have 2 days of sun and can put on 2 great shows. It's telling of what kind of folks you are, though, when you see that many people standing out in the rain watching an air show. If you went down to the south where we're spoiled rotten with good weather, you wouldn't find that. Everybody would have packed up and gone home. So I always enjoy being up in Wisconsin and Minnesota and the states where you guys have harsher conditions because you're willing to tough it out. And I thought that was great today. It was really fun to fly over an air show with bad weather like that and see that many people out there enjoying the show. And the umbrellas you just see the umbrellas turn back and forth as we're going left and right. And that was pretty neat to see. But thanks for the intro, Gary. A little background about myself. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I was a Cub Scout and Webelos and Boy Scout there at a troop in Atlanta. And when I finished high school, I went to a public school in North Fulton County in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went up to the Naval Academy for college. My intent had always been to serve in the military, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do necessarily, but I knew that there were a lot of ways to get into the military. You can join right away from high school, and you go in as an enlisted soldier or sailor, or you can go to college, and you can get an education and then join, and you go in as an officer if you do that. And so my hope was to go in as an officer, and I looked at my different options, and the Naval Academy was a free school. Because of that, any money that my parents had saved up for me, they either get to keep, or as it turned out, I got a nice Chevy Blazer when I turned 21 from them as some of my college money. But it's a free school, and when you graduate, you're automatically hired. As opposed to most college graduates who finish college and then they go looking for jobs, the Naval Academy hires every one of their graduates, and that's them saying, hey, we believe in you, we're going to train you right, and we're going to hire you afterwards. And so I asked to go there, I applied to go there, and it's a long application process, but I did that because I wanted to be a part of the service, and I went specifically to the Naval Academy because I wanted to have options open to me. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my options in a second, but the Naval Academy offers the Marine Corps, so if you like the stuff the Army does, whether it's tanks, artillery, helicopters, the Marine Corps has all that. Plus you have submarines, ships, Navy SEALs, aviation. One thing most people don't know about the Naval Academy is that we graduate as many aviators every year as the Air Force Academy, which I think is surprising to most guys who just want to fly. And so in my class, almost every single person who wanted to fly got to fly airplanes. And that in and of itself is an awesome trip. But after I finished the Naval Academy, I moved down to Pensacola, Florida, where we live now, and I started flight school. It takes about 2 years to get through flight school, and I selected jets and then eventually F-18s, which is the same airplane we fly in the Blue Angels. So I flew that out of Oceana, which is a naval air station in Virginia Beach, Virginia, for just a little bit more than 2 years. We fly almost the exact same airplane you saw today during the air show. It's gray and it's loaded down with bombs and missiles, and we're flying over Iraq and Afghanistan in support of the men and women who are on the ground. We are there to either shoot down enemy aircraft or drop bombs on the bad guys who are trying to blow up our sailors and Marines and soldiers who are on the ground there. So I flew off of an aircraft carrier called the Theodore Roosevelt. We were in the Persian Gulf for about 5 months, and when I returned, I applied to the Blue Angels and then moved down to Pensacola, Florida. And that's where I've been since the summer of 2007. I made some notes here. There are a couple things I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight. Before I do that, who was here when I spoke 2 years ago? Okay, right on. So a good group. I'm not going to assume you remembered everything I said, so I'm going to cover a couple of the same things that I mentioned last time. And what's most important for me to convey to you guys is what I took away from scouting, the experience I had, and it was an unbelievable experience. I think I probably joked with you, if you jumped in the car and grabbed my wallet, of the few cards I have, like my credit card and my driver's license, I have my Eagle Scout card that I got back in 1992. And it's one of the few things I carry with me everywhere I go because I was proud of it, and I'm proud of it because of how hard it was to earn. And I would say the same. Are there any Eagle Scouts here? You have some hands? You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. What you are proudest of is what is hardest earned. And that was hard to earn for myself, and I was very proud to have it, which is why I keep that card with me everywhere. But there are a couple things that you're learning in scouting that you don't really know you're learning right now, and you take it for granted. First and foremost, I'm reminded of the motto. Who knows the motto? Shout it out for me.
Be prepared.
Be prepared. That's exactly right. We'll do questions in just a little bit, okay? Be prepared. You do this every day, and you probably don't recognize you're doing it. You're being prepared. When you come here to this camp out, whose tent is wet right now? Whose sleeping bag is wet? I know if it had been me when I was your age, mine would have been wet. I learned that lesson the hard way, a lot of times. My very first camp out I ever went on, I was, I guess I was probably 11 or 12 years old. Is there a scout show up here that you guys do? Is there a yearly scout show or anything? We had a scout show in Atlanta. It was a big convention, and we would sell tickets to it. And the more tickets you sold, you could get rewards. So one of the rewards I got for selling tickets was a Boy Scout of America backpack. And it was a giant green backpack. It didn't have a frame on it. It was just the pack itself, and it had really thin nylon straps. And I won this backpack, and it didn't have separate compartments. It just had one big hole. And I filled all this stuff in. I'm going to my first camp out. I loaded up with about 25 or 30 pounds of equipment, and I hit the road. We went to the Cahutta Wilderness, which is a trail through North Georgia and into Tennessee, and I was about a mile into it. I had blisters all over my feet. I was crying because the straps hurt my back so much. I barely made it to the campsite 3 miles later. When I got there, I pulled out the tent that I'd never set up. I set it up on a hill. I spent the entire weekend sleeping on top of my buddy because we kept rolling down on top of each other. I didn't have good water. I didn't know how to boil water. I had a hard time lighting a simple fire. All of these things that you're learning along the way. And then, oh, by the way, it starts to rain. I didn't have a good rain fly on my tent, and I'm soaking wet all weekend. And that was my very first camp out, and it didn't go very well. But you guys here, you're learning these hard lessons. You're learning how to be prepared. You're learning how to pack your stuff for the weekend. I would wager to say that most of you guys, your friends at school who are not in Scouts, if you went to them and said, I want you to pack everything you need for a weekend in the outdoors, and hit the road and stay dry, stay comfortable, eat well, do all these things that you guys take for granted, they probably couldn't do it. And they probably would be afraid of what you're doing right now, if I had to bet. But you guys do it all the time. And the same thing is true for us in aviation. When we fly, before we take off every single time, we have to be prepared. It holds true for even the simplest of things. For example, I was flying up here on Wednesday from Pensacola, Florida. I'm up at 45,000 feet. And my cockpit has a pressurization issue. And it's not a big enough deal that I have to land right away, but the problem was if one more little thing had happened, then my aircraft depressurizes automatically, and probably within 30 seconds, my body, if you take your body from 0 feet to 45,000 feet, your organs start to explode. It's like when you scuba dive. So you have to know right away what are your emergency procedures. I've got to know I have to turn one switch to off, I have to push the aircraft down. I have to go from 45,000 feet down to 1,000 feet within about 15 or 20 seconds, or my body's literally going to explode. And so you have to have these procedures, all your emergency stuff cold. And that was just Wednesday getting up here, and this stuff happens to us all the time. And it's not that the airplanes are bad, they're complicated machines and things sometimes go wrong. But it's simple stuff for us to learn and memorize, but you better know it, you better be prepared, or when things go wrong, you're going to be up a creek without a paddle. And that's a bad way to be. And so you guys are learning these lessons right now, and you will keep it with you. I promise you that. There are lots of guys who will not learn at age 12 or 14 or 15 how important it is to be prepared. Another thing I learned is how to be comfortable outside. And I might have relayed this story to you when I was here 2 years ago. But you're out here in the woods for the weekend, and hopefully you're staying dry, hopefully you're eating well, and you're comfortable when the sun goes down and it gets cold. But other guys and gals that you go to school with, they don't know these lessons. And I was, 24 years old, and I went through the Military Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School. Have you guys ever heard of that? We call it SEER School. We become prisoners of war. And what the military does is before any pilot is allowed to go overseas and deploy, they make you go through a 2-week training course where they teach you how to survive with basically nothing, only the equipment that we eject with. If I was to eject in Afghanistan or Iraq right now, where people on the ground, they don't want me to be their friend, they want to kill me, unfortunately. And so they teach us how to survive in the outdoors, how to evade capture, how to resist once we are captured, and then how to escape if we find ourselves as prisoners. So we spend a week in a classroom learning, and then they take us out to the woods for a week. We got out to the woods on a Thursday. I didn't come back until the following Friday. So for 8 days, you get no food. And that's a long time to go without eating. You're allowed to eat anything that you can find on the ground. So I ate some occasional berries or whatever, but you have no extra clothes, you have no tent, you have nothing to eat, like I said, and you have and there are people hunting you who will eventually capture you and take you to a prison camp so that you learn, and then they beat you. They actually beat you. All the same stuff that you hear about. Have you guys heard of Guantanamo Bay and the prisoner detainee stuff? Have you heard about that on the news? The same stuff they're doing to these prisoners, they do to us every single 2-week class that we go through. And they put us on a board and they put a equivalent of a handkerchief over your face and pour water on it, and you think you're drowning, and they call that waterboarding. And they take you and they put you in a box that you can't fit in, and they beat you in there. But it's so that we know what's going to happen to us if we were to become prisoners. And so this whole week we're out there, we're not eating, we're making our own tents, we're out of just lean-tos. To me, it just felt like a camp out, honestly. But I've got grown men who are going through this class with me, and they're crying. They're crying themselves to sleep at night because they're not comfortable being outside because they've never had this training. And here I am, I thought, I don't really want to be a prisoner this week. That's unfortunately what's going to happen to me in a couple days. However, this feels like a camp out. And I was a lot colder than this when I was 13 years old getting my Wilderness Survival Merit Badge at Boy Scout camp. I remember being in a lean-to, just shivering myself to sleep and being absolutely miserable. But I learned that lesson at 13, and now when I'm 25 and I'm going through Navy survival training, it's easy. I already learned that hard lesson that you guys are learning while you're out here. And so that's something that you probably take for granted, but you shouldn't, because you're learning some hard lessons being out here in the woods. And the last thing, and I know I talked about this last time I was here, one of the most important things I took away from scouting is how to set realistic goals and then how to accomplish them. And every one of you is doing that as you move up through the ranks. If I said to someone who in here has just started in their Boy Scout troop? In the back there in the gray. How long ago did you start? 2 months ago. That's pretty fresh. Okay. So if I said, what's your name? Craig? Trey. Okay. Trey, if I said, does it sound like it's going to be hard to earn your eagle? Do you think yes or no? It will be hard. Who here does not think that would be a hard thing to do for someone brand new? It is hard. It takes a lot of time. But really, it's not that hard. And this is what we talked about last time. It's pretty simple if you open up your Boy Scout handbook and you look at what you have to do to make it through each of the ranks. Is it very hard to become a tenderfoot? Nope. Is it hard to become a second or a first class? Nope, it's not so hard. You have to earn some merit badges. You have to do some community service. You have to go to scout camp, hopefully. You have to be active in your troop. You might need to hold a leadership position at some point. None of that stuff's hard, but you have to do it. If you want to become an Eagle Scout, you have to do each of these tasks as you go. And they're not so hard. But when you lump them all together and you think, boy, Trey, how old are you? You're 10? Okay. You think, boy, I'm 10. It's going to take me maybe 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 years to earn your eagle. That sounds like a pretty daunting task. That sounds like it's going to be hard to do, but it's not really that hard if you take it step by step. And that's true for everything in life. There are lots of guys I know who started flight school with me. I had never flown an airplane in my life, and I go down to flight school with guys who have thousands of hours flying airplanes. They might have been instructors as civilians in Cessnas or Bonanzas, things like that. And they failed out of flight school because they didn't know how to set small goals. Nothing in flight school is difficult. It's just like earning your eagle. You just have to go step by step. You have to make it through the coursework. You have to study. You have to pass all the tests to learn about the aerodynamics and the weather involved. And once you finish that, you have to do a little bit of physiology training. They make you swim in a pool for a mile in your flight suit. That's pretty challenging. It's exhausting. It's tiring to swim that far, but it's not impossible. And then they put you in the pressure chamber, and your body has to function right when they take you up to 35,000 feet and drop you back down again, and your insides feel like they're exploding. And that's before you ever get into the simulator or the airplane. And then every step you go, you have to learn new things. And if you try to do it all at once, it'd be impossible. But if you go step by step, just like you move up through the ranks of scouting, it's not that hard. And so I got winged, and I thought, well, it took me a couple years to do it, but it wasn't that hard to earn my wings because I had been a Boy Scout, because I had learned how to move up, how to set small goals, and how to accomplish them methodically. And that's something you guys are learning right now that you probably don't think about. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about what I do on a daily basis, and I think you guys got a good view of that today. Did everyone get to see the show this afternoon? Yep, awesome. So my average day is I strap on an airplane, and I don't sit in my airplane, I strap it on my back. That's how I vision it. I take this airplane, I put these two shoulder straps. It turns out it's my ejection seat that I'm strapping into, but I think about strapping this airplane on my back, and I'm taking this airplane for a ride. And I jump in there. It's a $30 million piece of equipment that I'm strapping into every day. It's got 10,000 pounds of flammable jet fuel. It's capable of going from 0 miles an hour to 1,500 plus miles per hour. I can go from the surface up to altitudes I'm not even allowed to tell you about, but obviously 45,000 feet because I've already told you that much. And it can pull 7.5, 8 Gs. Do you guys know what G-forces are? Who doesn't know what a G-force is? We've got a couple. Okay, for someone who's right there in the light green shirt, have you been to a, no, right here. Yep, you. Have you been to a, sorry, it's tan? Yeah. Okay, tan. Have you been to a amusement park before? Yeah. Who's been on a roller coaster? Okay, right on. So you know when you're at the bottom of a roller coaster and you're trying to keep your hands up before you go up for the first loop or something, and you feel the weight of gravity pushing your arms down, it's hard to keep your head up or it's hard to keep your hands up? That's a G-force. It is the force of gravity exerting its pressure on you by more than just normal. As we all stand or sit here, we're under 1 G. The force of gravity times 1. That's just our own mass, our own body weight. But in an airplane, I'm pulling 7 or 8 Gs. So my 200-pound body now weighs 15, 16, 1,700 pounds sometimes. When you're on a roller coaster, you might feel maybe 2.5 Gs, and you can't lift your arms up because your arm doesn't weigh 10 pounds anymore, it weighs 20 pounds. And that's what we do every day. This airplane is capable of pulling 7 or 8 Gs, and at that high amount of G, the blood is literally pulled from your head. So if you're not doing something while you're flying, if you're not squeezing every muscle in your body and breathing right, you'll pass out. And unfortunately, if you pass out in an airplane, especially when you're really low and you're really fast, you probably won't survive much longer. You've got about 10 seconds left to live, and it usually takes about 15 seconds to wake up if you pass out. So it's one of these things we're constantly dealing with. But here I am with a $30 million aircraft strapped to my back. I'm flying around right off the deck. Hopefully I surprised a couple of you guys. Were you watching when I came in for my sneak pass? Number 6 got you. Okay, that's fair. Well, I am so low to the ground that it honestly feels like I'm driving a car. That's how low you are. You feel the trees rush by. It's really challenging here, by the way, because you've got a couple hills that are just southwest of the airport, which makes it even harder in Eau Claire, as it turns out. But I'm coming by so low that I really feel like I'm just driving in a SUV. Who can guess how fast I'm going? White shirt. How fast? How fast? 400 miles an hour. It's faster than that. Red jacket. 650? That's a pretty good guess. A little faster. That's close. You guys have bracketed it. 750 miles an hour. Right off the ground. So you've been in your parents' car when they're maybe going just a touch faster than the speed limit, maybe doing 75 or 80 miles an hour, and I hope that feels fast on just a highway. But when you're doing 750 miles an hour, you're going a mile every 2 or 3 seconds. And the world goes by really fast. No kidding. And that's what I do. That's what I get paid to do. And it is the most unbelievable job in the whole world. But what you might not know is that when I found out now just a little bit more than 10 years ago that I was going to fly airplanes for a living, I cried. I wept and I sobbed and I cried like a child for weeks because I hadn't wanted to do that. At that point in my life, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and that was my first choice on my sheet that I filled out at the Naval Academy. It said, what job do you want? I put down Navy SEAL and then Navy pilot. And part of the reason I did that was because I didn't know how to fly airplanes. I knew a lot of people who did. I figured, well, anything that would be really fun to fly, they'll get to fly, and I'll just be stuck with something not so fun. And I just wanted to be on the front lines. I wanted to be the one out there defending our country, and that was really important to me to do. And so I put down Navy SEAL. I didn't get it, and I was absolutely crushed. Because here I am, I've spent 4 years at college. I spent probably 6 years leading up to college wanting to do this, and I find myself kind of at the end of the road, and now I have failed, in my opinion. I didn't get what I wanted. And I had to kind of relook at what I was doing. And honestly, I went down to flight school, and I had to step back and say, am I going to either A, kind of go through this and make a half-hearted attempt to do well in flight school? There are a lot of guys here who have wanted to be fighter pilots since they were little kids, since they were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Maybe their parents were pilots, maybe their parents were in the military. They've got a huge head start on me. I don't know what I'm doing. Or the other avenue is to say, the military has chosen me to do this job, and it would say more about me as a person if I worked even harder than these guys, because it's something I don't want to do. And it wasn't the job I chose, but it might mean more about me as a service member of our country if I give it even more effort and try to work harder and see what happens. And that's what I try to do. And thankfully, there were hiccups along the way, but I eventually finished flight school and selected the airplane I wanted, and that was the F-18 Hornet. I think it is the greatest airplane ever built, and I love flying it. But at first, when I was a college senior, I hadn't wanted to do it, and I hadn't wanted to do it enough that I was willing to cry about it. And here I am on flight school, flight number 1. I take off. Within the first 10 seconds, it was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my whole life. Hands down compared to anything. And at that point in college, I had jumped out of airplanes. I had 65 skydives. I'd climbed Mount McKinley. I'd gone all over the world doing fun trips because that's stuff I enjoyed doing. I'm in a small airplane called a T-34, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life. And I knew from that minute on that I had the greatest job in the world. And now here I am 10 years later, and I'm flying 750 miles an hour right over downtown Eau Claire. And it doesn't get a whole lot better than that. It's a pretty fun job. And thank you. And the only reason I tell you that, I don't want to tell you about all the times I've failed in my life, but I will tell you that sometimes you'll fail and you're not really failing. You just have a little bit of a roadblock. And there are other ways to get around. And if someone tells you something you don't like, if you try out for a team and you don't make it, if something happens and you feel like you failed, you can fall over and you can quit right there. Or you can stop, you can take a look at yourself, you can reevaluate what your goals are, and you can try again. And no one will stop you from trying again. There are 2 great stories I heard. I was doing a program in Georgia called Governor's Honors when I was a high school senior, and the governor came down to tell us some stories. And he had a really funny story about a student he had met who had applied. He was an average high school student, and he applied to 2 or 3 really, really hard colleges to get into. And it was no surprise to him when he got denied by all of them. And his rejection letters he saved, and eventually he hadn't gotten into any of the colleges he wanted to go to. So he wrote back, as it turned out it was Harvard, he wrote back Harvard and said, I received your rejection letter, thank you very much for considering me. As it turns out, I'm going to reject your rejection and I'll be showing up for class on September 1st. And he showed up, and guess what? Harvard had a spot open for him. And he got in to the school he wanted to go to. We have a similar situation at the Naval Academy. Every July 1st when we start a new class up there, we have about 1,200 students, and the Naval Academy doesn't expect everyone to finish. In fact, they figure maybe 100 of those 1,200 students will quit just during the summer, during the boot camp process. And more importantly, there are 3 or 4 kids every year who quit on the very first day. They get there, they're scared, they don't like getting yelled at, they don't like running around. And so they quit before they even take the oath and become service members. And so a guy who was eventually a good friend of mine showed up on the very first day. He had applied, he had not gotten in, and he showed up and said, hey, I'm here, this is my name. I understand that probably 3 or 4 guys are going to quit today. I'm waiting around, I'm here all day. If one of them quits, I'm in. And he waited around, and about 4 p.m. they grabbed him and said, you're in. And there he was. He had been rejected by the Naval Academy 6 months before that, but that day he took the oath with us. So there are lots of ways to get around rejection, failure, anything that you think where you have not succeeded, there are ways around that. I want you guys to keep that in mind, because each one of you will make mistakes, each one of you will fail. Every one of you whose tent is soaking wet, whose sleeping bag is wet, you've made a mistake. I did the same thing a dozen times, but you're going to learn from it. And 10 years from now, or shoot, maybe even 4 or 5 years from now, when you're the senior leaders of your scout troop, you're going to be the ones helping the new scouts and showing them how to do it. And that's something you also probably take for granted, is the leadership you learn in the Boy Scouts, the lessons you learn in the leadership that you practice on a fairly routine basis. And now the last thing I want to mention to you guys, because it strikes a tone with me, is really why I wanted to go into the military. There are lots of jobs to do out there. You can make straight A's in high school, you can go to a great college, you can get out of there and you can make $1 million a year. And there are some people who they want nothing more than to do that. For me, that was not the case. I knew when I was really, really young that I wanted to join the military, and I always just felt called to serve. I felt like it was important to me to defend my family, my friends, this country that's given us so much. It was something I wanted to do. And I heard a neat example not too long ago that I wanted to relay to you guys because I think it might have an impact on you. I want you to imagine, if you would for me, that you're in, let's see, you're in downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul. Are there a couple of tall buildings down there? Yeah. Yep. So let's say the two tallest buildings are separated by maybe 100 feet. So you go up to the 80th floor, you look across at the other building, and there's a 12-inch wide plank that runs from one building to the next. So if I said to you, you're at the top of this building, if you walk across this plank 100 feet, there's a bag that has $1 million in it. Bring the bag back to this side, and it's your money. You probably are never going to have to work another day of your life. The problem, though, is we've tried it before, and it turns out that 9 out of every 10 people who try it die. And that's just going one way. So your odds of living, getting the money, coming back, are maybe 5%. So only 5 out of 100 guys who try this are going to actually live and get to keep the money. So if I told you that, but if you make it, if you live, you never work a day of your life. You go buy the fastest car you can, you buy the biggest house you can, and you sit around playing Xbox the rest of your life. Pretty good deal, right? So, show of hands, if I said that's the deal, who would do it? I don't believe all of you. Okay, but it looks like maybe a quarter of you, maybe 1 out of every 4 you guys are willing to risk your life for $1 million. So what if I said to you, there's not $1 million over there? As it turns out, on the other side of that building, your mother, your father, and you have your younger brother and your younger sister, and they're all over there. And that building is now on fire. So you've got to run over there, you've got to grab your little sister, you've got to run back. Then you've got to run over there and grab your little brother and run back. And now you're doing that twice. So it's not a 5% chance of living, it's a 2.5% chance of living to save your little brother and your little sister. Who would make that trip? Cool.
I'd take them both in one trip.
You take. That's a good idea. The problem is your chances go down even more if you take them both in one trip. But that's a good idea. Now, I saw a couple hands not up, so I'm guessing that you probably don't care for your little brothers and little sisters. Or you don't have any, and that's fair too. But the point I'm trying to get across, and the point that struck a tone with me, is the fact that, you know, maybe 1 out of every 4 you guys was willing to risk your life to go grab $1 million. But just about everybody out here is willing to risk your life to protect your family. And that's one of the reasons I joined the military. I'm absolutely willing to risk my life if it means I'm protecting someone or I'm saving someone or I'm doing the right thing. I'm serving a cause that's just bigger than me. It's more important to me than making money or having a fast car or a big house. It's about something where you can come home, you can look at yourself in the mirror and you just feel like you've done something important. And the military is not the only way to do that. There are so many ways to do that. It's about finding a job, finding a life, and finding a cause that's bigger than just you. And whether it's your teachers at school, whether it's the doctors at the hospital, whether it's the lawyers who are protecting the innocent, whether it's the service members, the firemen, the policemen, you could think of 1,000 different jobs. But there are so many ways, and maybe it's someone who has a normal job who spends their time volunteering or serving other causes. There are lots of ways to do it, but I would encourage you guys to think about that as you get older. Because when you have a job where you serve a cause bigger than just you will never look back and say, what did I do with my life? You'll never find yourself down the road and think, boy, life went by pretty fast. And I don't know if I made the right contribution to my country, to my family, to all these things. So I just want you guys to think about that. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to serve. It never mattered to me that I flew airplanes. I honestly believe it's the greatest job in the whole world, now having done it for 10 years. But it mattered less to me that I flew airplanes and more to me that I just served my country. Whether you serve for 2 years, 20 years, or 40 years, it's a very rewarding job, and that's why I do it. That's why I'm here tonight to talk to you guys, and I would encourage you guys just to think about it. So on that note, I'm happy to take questions. I don't want to wear you guys out. I know you have other fun stuff to do once you light the campfire. but maybe 5 or 10 minutes worth if there anybody who has questions about our show or about what we're doing. I told you to wait, so go ahead.
How do you meet the other people and stuff? Are you the commander?
The other Blue Angels?
Yeah.
I'm not the commander. I'm the lead solo pilot, so I'm kind of the number 2 in command for our squadron, as it turns out. But we actually have, he asked, how do we meet everyone else? And we have Navy pilots who apply to our squadron, just like you'd apply for any job. And they put in an application, and we look at how many flight hours they have, their records. We talk to the people they've worked with before, and then we get to know them. We meet them and talk to them and see what kind of guys they are. We spend a lot of time together, so when we hire, whether it's a pilot or a doctor or a maintenance officer, we're very specific about who we get because we're with them all the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you want to pick somebody you can relate to, and that ends in your like worst enemy.
You bet. Yeah, you want to pick someone who you enjoy being around, who you can relate to. Right over here in the red hat.
Has anything ever gone wrong? You guys are
Okay, he asked, has anything ever, oh, is that better now? Can you guys hear me for the first time tonight? Perfect. What I was saying earlier was I had a great time in Scouts, and that about sums it up. He asked, has anything gone wrong? And sure, stuff goes wrong every day. The problem with our airplanes is we fly the oldest airplanes the Navy has. And most people think our airplanes are shiny and new and perfect, but that's not the case. We give the brand new airplanes to the guys that are going to Iraq and Afghanistan. We give them all the new tricks and all the new tools, and we fly the old ones because all we really need is a good, strong airplane that's going to fly fast and low for us. But because they're old, things eventually do go wrong, and so we deal with it. Like I was saying on the flight up here, things went wrong. It's not routine, but you get used to handling the emergencies that I was telling you about, and that's one of the reasons you have to be prepared all the time. But these airplanes, in terms of car miles, you guys know how many miles are on your parents' cars? How much? Give me a guess. 5,000, 100,000, that's all pretty reasonable. Our airplanes have probably, I don't know, maybe 10 million miles on them. And that's probably an understatement, to be honest. I flew probably 400 miles just today during the show, when you count all the zigzagging back and forth and if you follow the airplane over the ground. But they've got a lot of miles on them, and they go through a lot more work than the cars do. So things do eventually go wrong, but like I said earlier, it's about how you handle it. And one of the tricks in our job is how to do it and how to be calm. Because if your engine catches on fire, or you hit a bird, and you freak out, and you're flying a foot away from somebody else, well, it's now not just your problem, it's the problem of everyone around you.